we're inundated today with this idea of artificial intelligence. And AI in some ways has become a buzzword. So there's machine learning, then there's AI, and they're connected but not exactly the same. And I think we have to be careful as a society and as academics, especially in how we talk about these things. But they started to talk about AI, and they started to talk about some of the tools that were coming in Canvas to help not only faculty but students be able to navigate writing, course creation, content consumption, all of these different things. As they were talking, and I can't remember the actual, if I find the clip for this on the web, I will share it with you. The officer from Instructure who was talking about this was like, who better to explain the tool that we are focusing on, which by the way is called Conmigo, and I will put a link to that down below. And if you hear Conmigo and your mind goes to Khan Academy, there's good reason for that, because guess what? Conmigo is Khan Academy's approach to AI. And for those of you not familiar with Khan Academy, I won't go into like the full detail here. I'll link some videos below in the details. But Saul Khan's story is one of my favorite stories ever, because the snapshot version is his niece was having trouble in math. He was a hedge fund manager. He started tutoring her online and started creating videos to help her understand math. She became very successful, went on and actually got moved into advanced math. And then out of that, relatives, friends, everybody said, you should put this online. You should put this on YouTube. And now you have Khan Academy, which helps thousands, if not millions, of students, adults, people who are just wanting to know more real world tips on how to learn advanced or even basic topics that you may not have been exposed to. Huge fan of Khan Academy. And I think it's one of my favorite stories as far as how learning can occur and grow naturally. This was a fanboy moment. This was a geek out moment for me. So the person is presenting and they said, well, who better to tell you about these new features and this new tool than Saul Khan? And he wasn't on the agenda. He wasn't scheduled. He wasn't even, nobody knew he was going to be there except for the Instructure folks. And bam, Saul Khan walks out on stage. The entire place goes crazy. He tells the abbreviated version longer than what I just said about his story. So it's definitely worth watching. But then he starts to talk about how they intentionally have built into Conmigo, which is now partnering with the Canvas LMS, these tools to help faculty members and to help students address real world issues and concerns in the academic space. So not always spying on you, artificial intelligence, not open, take my data, all you want, artificial intelligence, but very purposeful, targeted, can you help me with my workflow, artificial intelligence. And I won't go through all of the things he mentioned, but I want to highlight two. One is extremely helpful for, and there are different approaches to how someone may do discussions in their courses. One approach is to be very engaged and constantly have a back and forth with students. And that can be very useful. And especially if you have a group of students who don't mind that level of engagement from an instructor, it can be very valuable. And there's no right or wrong way here. It depends on your approach, your demeanor, how you craft your assignments, all these other things. The other, though, and the one that I've subscribed to over the years, is kind of a hands-off approach until everyone has had their say. So I will put up a discussion topic or question or ask them for a reflection, and then I will let them talk it out. And once they are done, once they get to the point to where the discussion has closed, I will come back in and I will provide kind of a high level summary and kind of fill in the gaps and talk about what I thought was the most important out of all of their discussions. Now, as you can imagine, in a smaller class, which I've been fairly fortunate to have, but there have been times that I've had 90 students, 100 students, that becomes pretty cumbersome to read every single discussion post, and even more so if you're doing them individually. So you have to kind of make a choice of how much do I read, how much do I process, how much time do I have to do all of that. One nice thing in Conmigo, which is really cool, is that you have this discussion summary tool. And one thing I think is really important here is going to be to test this, and that's why it's a feature preview. But this idea that can I, as the professor now, click on summarize, get a summary of all of the discussions that have happened, not just the initial postings, but every reply. And I can then say, okay, what were the high level themes? And I can use the AI in a very effective way then to synthesize what my response should be. Not to create my response. My response is still mine, but it can give me underlying data to understand what the conversations were that were happening in that specific context without me having to read every single post in depth and take these huge copious notes to then turn that into that. It can give me a starting point. It can give me a high level summary. Now, again, there's some testing that has to happen here. We know AI hallucinates. We know there are issues with AI. But is this a way to help streamline that process? So that's just one example. Really, really cool. And it's something that I can see myself using. It's also contained within Canvas and Khan Academy so that you're not as worried about the privacy issue aspect. I would compare it to the Apple Silica network and the ChatGPT arrangement they have, because you still have a limited number of companies that are kind of pulling this data or processing it. And I think that it's important that the companies like an Instructure, like a Turnitin, who does a similar thing with some of their different products, like Khan Academy, Conmigo, I think it's really important for them to have these agreements saying, hey, we're going to use your service and we're going to, you know, have you help us with this data, but we need to make sure you're not mining it and selling it and doing things that are not helpful to the consumer on the educational end, especially. So I think the fact that it exists behind the learning management system through a platform that is based on a nonprofit educational model, then going out finally to the for-profit model, but with restriction, is very important. So anyway, that's my little tirade on AI and privacy. And Voya had a really good recent article on AI with that. Now, here's the really cool part from the student side. And this is where I think we could really have some interesting overlap or some interesting long-term applications of this type of technology. What Conmigo does and is in development, which will be here soon, is going to be they will allow students to, as they are writing within the system, within the learning management system, as they're crafting a discussion post, as they are uploading documents that they wrote in Word or in Google Docs, they will allow them to run that through Conmigo to give them advice or to give them guidance. Now, Grammarly does this to some degree. A company called Packback does this as well. They allow you to have just-in-time interactions around, your writing style, flow, process, all of these different components. Grammarly kind of allows you to point click, so you can have it kind of correct it for you, and that's a little less. It explains it, but you have to read that explanation. So to me, that's not quite as valuable, although full disclosure, I use Grammarly in my own work, but I also do read why it's saying the thing, because it may not be accurate. There are sometimes word choice it doesn't get right. Packback has the scaffolding structure. It's a paid service, so it will give you suggestions. It will say, check this sentence for clarity. You might want to rethink, and it'll give you an example sentence. Again, similar to what Grammarly does, but not 100%. And then the cool thing about that platform is if you hit a wall or if you're having the same types of problem, you can click help and get a live tutor. And again, it's an at cost service. You get a live tutor who can then help you in real time navigate your writing. Kind of cool. With Conmigo and this approach for them, you can get very similar functions to Packback that allow you to see, where is my writing not clear? What are the common roadblocks I'm running into? What are the challenges that are happening? Am I not citing? Am I not using the right style? And then the cool part about the Conmigo approach is not only does the student see that and get that real just-in-time feedback, but it gets shared with the faculty member. So now the instructor sees my student is struggling with sentence structure. My student is struggling with citing sources. My student is struggling with clarity of thought. All of that is then rolled up, and now in real time, that instructor is able to intervene and really help the student move along and move further.